Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I'm your host. And in today's episode, I'm talking with Ian Barker from Ian Barker Gardens. So Ian runs a landscape design, construction and maintenance company in Melbourne. And in August this year, he's going to be celebrating 25 years in business. So he's been going for a little while and knows a thing or two. One of the things that kept popping up in the chat with Ian was the luck that he's had, which I think plays a big part in success. But as I mentioned to him, there's one thing to have some luck, but you've also got to work pretty hard when you get opportunities that come along, like he has had. He's built quite a few garden shows at the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show and a few at Chelsea Flower Show as well. So we talk about them and what he said to the Queen when he met her a couple of times. And yeah, at the end of the chat, I mentioned to him how much I enjoyed having the chat with him because he's just so passionate about what he does, and it's good to talk to people who enjoy doing what they're doing, and it just happens to be their job as well. So I have no doubt you'll enjoy this chat with Ian Barker, unless you're that person who gave me a 3-star review because we talk too much about garden shows in the podcast. That person won't enjoy this chat, but hopefully everyone else enjoys this chat with Ian. Ian, thank you very much for joining us on the Landscaping Podcast. So the first question I've got for you is how you started in the industry.
Well, firstly, thanks for having me. I got started, I think I was about 13 or 14. I did a bit of a garden in my mum and dad's garden. I don't know why I did it. I just felt like doing it. And then one of my older brothers was landscaping over a summer holiday, and I worked with him, and I was hooked, and I wanted to leave school straight away and become a gardener, but they wouldn't let me for a year. But I eventually talked them into it, and I got an apprenticeship as a gardener at the Austin Hospital as a 15, 16-year-old. So I started fairly young. I'm not a gardener. I didn't really take to gardening, but I loved landscaping. So I then did a landscaping apprenticeship with a guy called Tim Jackett, an associate, who was truly amazing. He worked on, $1 million jobs 30 years ago, and I had no idea how lucky I was to be working with him, and we'll be forever grateful. But that was my start. And then when I was about 21 or 22, I started my own business, which was way too young. And to top it off, I wanted to do my own design. So I went back to Melbourne Uni and did a design course that was pretty average, but it gave me some basic drawing skills. The business didn't work because I was young and naive, and so I went overseas for a few years, and I worked at the Fulham Palace Garden Centre in London, which again was just a really lucky break to work at that level. Like, I didn't realise, early 20s, you have no idea. And then when I came back from overseas, I started the business the second time around, and I would like to say I haven't looked back since, but it's been a fairly tough road. But that was 25 years ago I started the business. So this year is on the 19th of August, it'll be our 25th anniversary.
All right. We got big plans, big celebration planned?
We are hoping to take the team down to Tassie, fly ourselves down, maybe go for a tour out to Mona Gallery. Claire Takis is going to ask a few of her private garden clients to see if we can get access to the gardens, because I think it'd be special to just have a wander through some big private gardens. So that's we're just starting that now, Joel. So well done.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think that's what you said with the luck you had with who you worked for with Tim at the start. That's something I've noticed a lot. Is it's how important it is who you work for to start with, because you could have started with just a bloke who worked with one other guy and they just did a bit of maintenance as well on the side as landscaping. It'd be a completely different path to the skills you would have learnt off the start.
Yeah, I think so. I do, now that I'm older, I genuinely know how lucky I was. Tim used to work for a designer called Damien Colombo. And we did, my first job was in Harcourt Street with an underground car park and tennis court. And, it was just, I just took it all for granted. We did the Meyer family house in Berkeley Street in Hawthorn. I was 19 years old, and unfortunately Damien's no longer with us. He had an accident in New Zealand, but there's so much of what he used to do as a designer. I remember him telling me as a 19-year-old to pick up this established tree and twist it 6 inches to the right because it wasn't the right face. And I remember having a crack at him, and now 30 years on, I'm getting guys to move a tree because the face isn't quite right. So you're absolutely right that I took for granted what I was working on. And then when I had my own business and I was trying to get a $10,000 job, let alone $1 million job, I was thinking, how do I get those jobs? And then it became this sort of 10-year goal to get back into that world because it's more fun. I don't think you make more money, but you definitely have more fun doing it. So it's clearly where I want to stay and where I want to be. And I think I was absolutely lucky, and it wasn't planned, so it has to be luck.
Yep. Yeah, you need a bit of that as well, but you've also got to take advantage of it. So, and you clearly did that because you had the passion for the industry. So when you started your own business, what did you call that to start with? Was it Ian Barker Gardens to start with?
No. So it was Tim Jackett and Associates. I changed it to Ian Barker and Associates. Without selling myself short, Tim ran Cruiser 3. I still run Cruiser 3 to this day. On the bigger one, you can have 4. I ignored him for years and tried Cruiser 8 and 7 and 10, and now we run Cruiser 3 because it just works. There's no one hiding. It's effective. He was Tim Jackett and Associates, so I was Tim Jackett and Associates. He believed strongly in site signage, so I did site signage. And the number of people that don't do site signage, I just think, why wouldn't you do it? It's almost free advertising. So the only problem with Ian Barker and Associates is there was a lawyer that worked on Azaria Chamberlain's case, who was Ian Barker. So everyone thought we were a law firm. So we tried to get rid of the name and change it to the Landscape Gallery for a while. It failed miserably, so we went back to Ian Barker Gardens. But I'm pretty lucky. I've got to the point now where Steve runs construction, and he signs his own jobs. He bought a car yesterday that I found out last night. So the name is now just a name. But if I had my time over again, I wouldn't have called it Ian Barker Gardens.
Why is that?
Well, for the early days, everyone just wants Ian. I think that's if I don't get Ian, it doesn't work. Whereas now, like Daniel in the design office does the consults. They don't need me. I like to still do them, but I'm not required to do them. In the construction business, Steve signs the construction jobs. He quotes the construction jobs. I'm not required on site anymore, which is, I like to go to the site, but I don't have to go to the site. And it makes a huge difference in terms of where I get dragged, because all I really want to do is consults and draw. But if I'm stuck on a site for 5 hours a day, I can't do that. You can't do it all. So,
yeah.
But it took us a good 10, 15 years to remove me from the name. And sometimes I even answer the phone, Ian Barker Gardens, Jack speaking, just so no one knows it's me. But it's good fun.
So how did it start out, this version of Ian Barker Gardens? Did you start out by yourself and put people on pretty quick, or?
Yeah, well, I was working for a company that I won't mention their name because they weren't very good, and it was clearly going under, and so I decided to jump. We did the garden show. This company did the garden show in 1996. That's how old I am. And I remember thinking this could be pretty good. I might stay for the garden show and then leave. And I'm glad I did, because I got to see what the show was all about. And as you probably may guess, I'm still a big advocate for the shows and still enjoy them. So I did the show with this previous company. And then the day after the show, I resigned. Fundamentally, that was the end of that business. And there was 2 staff that worked for them that asked if they could come and work for me. And I said yes, probably stupidly, because I had no work, but I had 2 staff. So it's a funny thing. Brian Rankin says lazy people should employ staff because it forces them to get work. Because if you don't have any work, you can't afford to pay for the staff. So it was probably my start that, because I had these employees, it made me probably made me a little bit more energetic to start the business, shall I say, and build up that work. And then before I knew it, I had too much work and too many staff and not a lot of systems. And the business was a bit of a disaster again, because I was paying everyone else but me, as I think a lot of landscapers will relate to. and then I got some systems in place and some really good advice from certain people, and then you slowly turn it around and away you go.
So what sort of systems did you start with? Because that's a big thing in early businesses, is a key.
Well, again, I should have listened to Tim more. So he totally and utterly believed in crews of 3, and then you build up behind a supervisor. Whereas I didn't have the supervisors, so I just ran these crews of 8. I remember being on a job in Essendon, there was 8 guys running around. I had no idea what they were doing. I didn't have any build schedules. I didn't have any quoting systems. I'd sort of get to the end of the week and try and invoice. I'd go home overnight and I'd produce the quotes, and it's just madness. Like, the quintessential 80 hours earning 80 grand a year. The only problem was I wasn't earning the 80 grand. I was working 80 hours a week, and I'd be lucky making 40 grand a week. So we then managed to get some good staff. I reduced back to 6. It's that sink or swim. Like a lot of landscapers get big really quickly and then shrink. We did shrink, but we shrunk to 6 because I had 2 good supervisors. Then I built underneath those. And then one of the big decisions I made was Scott Timken worked for me. He was my first ever employee. He was one of the ones who came across. Wow. And he wanted to be a partner. And I remember telling him 5% of nothing is nothing. So why don't we go halves? And so that allowed me to concentrate on design while he concentrated on construction. So then that was the beginning of where we split, and then so we created a system under construction where he ran 2 crews of 3. And then we got a staff member in design, so at least we could get some work actually done. And then that design work fed the construction business, and the rest sort of goes on. So construction, we believe strongly in crews of 3, maintenance crews of 2, and even in design, there's crews of 2. So there's the lead designer, but the lead designer needs to have a staff member underneath them to be able to get the CAD work done, I think. But
I'd love to have someone really analyse why it is that crews of 3 work, because I've been talking about my staff about it. Like, I'll go on a site if I've got 4 of them there sometimes and lose my temper unnecessarily about the lack of stuff that's getting done, but it's really my scheduling that's forced it to happen, because they're all working. Like the crew I've got all work 100%, no doubts about it at all, but you just don't get the same amount of stuff done with more people there.
No, the productivity on the fourth is always subconsciously trying to figure out where he fits or she fits. So their intentions are pure,
yeah.
But because of the way the systems are set up, they're always trying to, well, do I help the paving guy? Do I help the mixer? They're not really sure where they fit in the mix. So when we do a bigger job now, we have 2 distinct crews of 3. So you have one manager that runs 2 crews of 3. So you can have 6 on a site, but there's this section over here and then this section over here. Mm. So the 4th or 5th, 5th is worse than the 4th. Like, they just float.
Mm.
And unless you've got an exceptional site manager that can run 6, it very, very rarely works. Like, you have to have someone who does nothing but drive the guys on site for it to work, but it doesn't. In my opinion, it doesn't work.
No,
yeah.
It makes.
And I have tried, Joel. I've tried every different scenario known to man, and I always come back to crews of 3.
Yeah. Yeah, then there's a lot of other successful businesses as well say the same thing. So, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So, has there ever been what's the largest amount of employees you've had? Is that what you've got now?
No, so we're at the moment, the largest we've had is 14. So 14 didn't work either. So I'm a great believer of 11 or 12. So you run crews of 3, but someone's always on annual leave, someone's always on sick leave. Whatever it might be, you might have 2 that can go back and fix something. So you run 3 crews of 3, plus you have 2 that can go and fix something up. So you don't actually lose your 3 crews of 3. So I'm a great fan of 10 or 11 staff. Given the amount of work that's around at the moment, we're trying to push to 12 to 13. I believe it's inevitable that we'll lose someone because of poaching or whatever else it might be. And if someone gets an opportunity they can't ignore, I think that it should be embraced. So I think it's silly to think that we won't lose someone in the next. In fact, I think it's silly to assume we won't lose 2 or 3 over the next 12 months.
Yeah.
So let's let's plan for it, and then there's no stress.
Mm.
So yeah, right now we're going up to 13, but that's a conscious decision.
Yep.
And we know that we won't be as profitable with 13 as we are with 11, but I'd much prefer to have staff than not.
Yeah, man, it's a long-term thing. So if any money that you can lose now is less than what you could lose later on when you're scrambling to find staff.
Yeah, correct. So, and touch wood, look, we work in an industry where there's opportunities that come up. You know, it's a reasonably, what used to be a transient industry, it's not so much anymore. It's a genuine career path now. But we haven't lost a staff member, and I'm touching wood because it always makes me nervous to say it out loud. We haven't lost a staff member in construction for 2.5 years, which is really, really good. But, you know, it's inevitable that they will move. Like, you know, I'll leave one day. Everyone's going to leave one day. So I think it's a sensible move to try and grow before we lose them.
Yeah. And something in regards to that, I was going to bring up one of your past employees was Jaden who's now at Greener Visions.
Yep.
So was that satisfying? So did he start his apprenticeship with you and then worked along and then he's gone out on his own from there?
Yeah, correct. So Jaden was with us. He did his apprenticeship. I should know this, and if he listens, he'll tell me off. I think he did it at a council, and then he came to work for us. He was driven really young. So, and then we took him to Chelsea, but just before the Chelsea trip, there was a bit of an incident where we had to have a bit of a heart-to-heart. He was young, and I sat him down. I went, you know, these opportunities don't come along very often. And he like most people just listen and go, yeah, whatever, old man, and move on. But he grabbed it and he went with it. He was brilliant overseas. He came back. He was superb. He gave us heaps of notice that he was going to go out for himself. And I never wanted to get any bigger. So I'm thinking this, you know, I don't want to call him a kid in a derogatory way, but compared to me, he's young. And he was going to be brilliant in our industry, and our industry needs people like Jaden. So he sort of became one of the first ex-employees to get a lot of our systems and openly have our systems. Like, he's quite, you know, looks the same as us. His systems are the same as us. So we probably happily feed Jaden maybe a half a dozen jobs a year. But if we didn't, like people like Ben Scott and,
yep.
you know, they feed him work because he builds brilliant work. And we need to talk him into becoming a board member for Landscaping Victoria, and he will be a superstar of our industry for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
And he, interesting enough, employs crews of 3. He will go to 10. It's the same method. And have you met Dave Bascom yet from Green Exteriors?
No, but I was going to bring him up as well because I saw you did an Instagram post recently.
Yeah, so he's another one. He became the second employee. He gave us 6 months notice he wanted to go out for himself and asked me what he should do. And I told him to go do a small business course and become a provisional member of Landscaping Victoria. So he did. And then he came back to me and said, I think I've just realised what I don't know. So he asked if he could stay on for another 18 months to 2 years. And I said, well, if you do that, you can have every system we've got. So he has. And we still catch up once a month. So I mentor Dave. He approached me and said, would I do it? And how much would it cost? And I'm loving it. I think I get just as much out of it as Dave gets, because, you know, once a month we catch up, we go through his figures, we go through his systems, and he's eating it up, and I think he's going to be another superstar. He's clearly 3 or 4 years behind Jaden, but he's just enthusiastic. And again, a bit like yourself, we need people in the industry. Like, I'm 52 now. I reckon I've got maybe 10 years in me. And I'm not saying I'm a leader of the industry, but I think we need people in the industry that are passionate about building gardens that are behind you, that, you know, you look at and just go, wow, as opposed to just people building a spec garden that is ticking a box. There's a difference between ticking a box and building a show garden that people just want to wake up in. And I think these ex-staff can do it and want to do it. And interestingly enough, we've now got 3 or 4 that have followed these two that want to stay with us for a bit longer so they can then follow in a similar path. So then they're not jumping as quickly as they might have in the past, because they sort of go, well, if I stay another 2 or 3 years and I ask Ian what I need to learn, there's not that fear that I'm going to dump them because they've threatened to leave me. I know they're going to leave.
Yep.
It's only a matter of time before Ben, who's now with us, leaves. And hopefully he'll be another superstar in the years to come. So Ben, if you're listening, one day it's you. But because he's well and truly earned the right. He's been with us for 5 or 6 years. He's a superstar. If he makes the decision that he wants to stay, I'd be over the moon. So I think there should be that career progression spoken about almost within the first 6 months of someone being employed. What's your plan? How are you going to get there? You know, what's your 2-year plan, 3-year plan? In my opinion, you're far more likely to keep them for 3 or 4 years than someone that you don't have a plan with.
Yeah. Yeah, I have that conversation when I employ staff. Like, I'll tell them, like, if you want to, like, because it doesn't bother me if they want to start their own business once they get qualified, because that's, you know, you've got to live your own life. And I'll tell them that I'll give them, if they work through and do their qualification through me and get qualified, they'll obviously, I'll think they're a decent worker. So then I'll give them more work than they can handle that gets sent.
Do you think, personally, I think qualified comes first. So while they're learning to become qualified, they're learning their skill. And then once they've become qualified, they should take a couple of years to learn how to run a site and how to control a site, and particularly control staff. It's not an easy thing managing people. And I think that's a skill all in its own. And then when you start the business, as you know, geez, it's tough. Like, you know, becoming a businessman, I found harder than becoming a landscaper. So I think it should be qualified and then another 2 or 3 year cycle. And everyone who's about to start their own business should do a small business course. It would be the least you would want to do. But
yeah, I got qualified, worked for the guy that for about, I reckon, 2 years, and then went out on my own. So that worked well. But you see, I've had one guy do it, and I've seen other guys, as soon as they get qualified, then they go out on their own, and then 6 months later, their business isn't running anymore.
Yeah. We when someone leaves us, we think a bit early. When anyone leaves us, if they're really good, we want them to come back if it doesn't work. It's not for everyone. There were probably times in my first 4 or 5 years where I thought, and there's probably times in my first 4 or 5 years where I should have stopped, but didn't. And we have got people that have worked for themselves and come back. They're brilliant because they know what it's like on the other side. You know, you have this vision that you're going to run a business and everything's going to be rosy and I'm going to make a lot of money, and it's not that easy. So, and I would absolutely say it's not for everyone. So if you do find that you've gone out for yourself and it's not for you, you must be better off earning a good salary with someone where you can work 40 hours a week and go home, as opposed to working 60, 70 hours a week for the same salary.
Yeah.
So, and without the risk, like, you know, you think of all the risk we hold. You know, that's another story.
Yeah, and it's the same with your designers. Have you had, because I know Bethany Williamson used to work for you. Have you had many designers go out on their own?
Yeah, so Bethany's a ripper and is already a superstar of the industry. Like, she's only been out for herself for 3 years and is absolutely going to kick goals. We had Michael Ford worked for me 21, 22 years ago. He was amazing. He now runs a company called In Locus. And he's another one I like to catch up once a year, maybe once every 6 months. He always wanted to go commercial, but he wanted to know the details. So he decided at 20 something, far more sensible than I was, that he wanted to do residential to learn the detail, and then went back to commercial and now runs in Locus. And Locus specialised in skate parks. He's extraordinary. We had one, Eric Holt works for Mud Office.
Yep.
So Eric, he got through our door by sending us a birthday invitation. So it was an envelope with a birthday invitation, and inside there it described what his history had been. And he openly said that he'd sent 5 of these to 5 different landscapers, and the 5 landscapers that he wanted to work for. We knew that he was 2 years max because he wanted to work with different landscapers that he'd actually sought out. Like I talk about how lucky I was to work with Tim. You know, Eric planned it. It was like a planned exercise. He left us, went to Hamilton Landscapes, left him, went to Mud Office. Like, with the greatest amount of respect to Mud, who's next? And then he will go out for himself, I think. But I just think that's really clever. I don't think those, there's a few employers that would see that as, they're being unloyal or they're doing, I just see it as clever. Like, how clever is that to be able to have that foresight to do it? So I'll play to him. So ultimately, I will leave the industry and others will leave and you'll leave and all sorts of stuff. And our industry is only as good as the younger ones coming through. And all I can say is there's some absolute rippers coming through, and the competition is getting fierce, and it's awesome. Like, it's so good. So yeah, I think they should be embraced.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and because things like that, if he's better off being upfront saying it's going to do it anyway, or if you know he's going to do it. And I've said the same about landscapers. It's as much as I want my employees to stay with me, it's a good thing to go and work with someone else to see the different way they do things, and it makes you a better tradesman.
Yeah, absolutely. If I was smart enough to do it at that age, I think I would have been a lot further down the path. And for people like Dave Baskin, I would never have had the guts to ask what he asked for. And then when he asked for it, I went, yeah, why wouldn't he do it? And I can honestly say his business is far more advanced than my ones at 3. Like, this is his 3rd year. If only I was smart enough to have asked for what he asked for. So people might look at him and think, well, why are you paying that? But I look at the experience he's getting at 3rd year in business going, well, how cheap is that? So yeah, I think that mentorship is really good, because ultimately, someone said to me many, many years ago, there's so much work around if you're good. So if you're good at what you do, there is more work than you can poke a stick at. With the greatest amount of respect to every single tradie I'm about to insult, it's very, very easy to look good as a tradesperson. And if you're good at what you do, there is more work than you can poke a stick at. So you're not really competing with anyone. There's so much work. And if you win this one, and then, Stevie Taylor and I often joke that I win this one, he wins the next one. And then, it doesn't matter. There's so much work, it doesn't matter. So I think if you concentrate on being good at what you do, the rest just comes. Which is why all these new ones coming through, there's so much work where don't worry about who you're competing with. Just get good at what you do, and the rest will come.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Dave he's lucky, like you were as well, to who he did his apprenticeship with. Like, again, if he did that with someone else, it's a completely different path that he's taking.
Yeah, I think so. But I think he would have been smart enough to move on. Yeah, I genuinely believe he would have moved on and gone somewhere else.
Yeah.
And again, that's okay too.
Yeah. Did you always have plans to start your own business early days, or was it just because that business was struggling?
I'm a bit I've got ADHD and all sorts of stuff going on, so I was probably not suited to work for other people for too long, because I'm too all over the place. It suits me to have people working for us, because it focuses. If you've got staff working for you and you're not focused, you're going to lose pretty badly. So I think that it must have always been on the radar, because I started quite young. I did seriously admire, and still do, Tim. So I suppose I was destined to try and follow in his footsteps. But I wasn't naturally talented. Like, you talk of Bethany Williamson, it's just a natural talent. Whereas I don't believe I have a natural talent. I just worked really, really hard. And then, if I'm honest, I then marketed really hard. So was it always destined to do it? No, there's never been a genuine, there's a plan now, but there was never a genuine plan in my 20s to say, I'm going to do this. I probably didn't do my first business plan until I was 35.
Yeah.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah. And speaking of marketing, was the Melbourne Flower and Garden Show part of that in the early days, or was that just something you did for enjoy?
It was something I loved.
Yeah.
There's people that it's probably one of the questions I get asked, is it good for your business doing the flower show? I don't know. I can't tell you, but I love it. And so I did my first one for the people that I used to work for. And interestingly enough, I did something in the lake 26 years ago. And it was only in 2016 we finally built a proper garden in the lake. So that was 20 odd years in the making, because I had that idea then, that I wanted to do something properly in the lake. But so a garden show is more for yourself than for marketing. If you try and set out to do a marketing strategy plan around a flower show, I think you'll fail. We did make a conscious decision to take the corner site up the top and do 3 years in a row. So we wrote down that we would stay on the corner site. We would do 3 years in a row. So every time someone came down, they would look for where we were on the corner, potentially. We set out to see if we could get 3 golds in a row, which we failed. We got 2 golds and a silver, which is still pretty good. We did 2016 because we got offered a sponsorship, but that was never in the plan. The quality of the work that we got pre-2013 to the quality of work that we were winning after 2016, I believe is better. Is it associated with the flower show or not? I don't know. Does it justify the enormous cost to go? Probably not. Because if you're going to invest $50,000, you could advertise and get the MCG for 3 games. Imagine how big your name would be if you got that for 3 games. So it's a really hard one to justify. And I think the powers that be at the flower show should invest in attracting the sponsors to join with the gardeners like they do in Chelsea. So the people that organise the event at Chelsea actively seek sponsors. And then once they seek a sponsor that's interested in sponsoring a garden, then they marry them with the garden designer.
All right.
So it doesn't cover all your costs, but it covers a large percentage of that cost. So I think there's a potential to do it a little bit differently, where the people who build these show gardens are supported a little bit more. Having said that, I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah. So were you going to be doing it before COVID started in the 25th?
No, we were going to do 3 and then have 5 years off. So the original plan was to do 13, 14, 15, have 5 years off, so 2020. We then did 16 just because. Then we were going to have 5 years off, so that came to 21. So we were going to go again in 21, then COVID hit. And then if I'm honest, then I lost a bit of momentum. I've just drawn a couple just in case we decide to go, but we would be planning, we always plan a year ahead, because you got to grow plants. If you're going to do it, you might as well do it properly and have a big crack at it. So best case scenario is 2023. So we'll go this year and have a bit of a look and see what it's like, the quality, and we'll make a decision in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So I'll either be 23, maybe 24, but
definitely going back though.
Oh, look, no, I never say never, and I never say definitely. So if we go this year, and I'm generally worried for this year because everyone's still a bit nervous, and a lot of the people that come to the show are a bit older. So I'm genuinely nervous that they come, and everyone's flat out with work. So there's not as many designers and contractors going, as you probably know. So I'm worried that the people that do go are going to get there and maybe be disappointed because there's not as many show gardens, and then not come back again in 23. So it's only my personal call. I'll watch it for the next year, maybe 2. I would genuinely like to do it again because I like it. I don't want to do it again because I desperately need the marketing.
Yeah.
I want to do it again because I think it forces us to push ourselves a bit more. Think of, you've drawn it, like you've built one of these gardens, you know how stressful it is. It puts everyone on edge, but it's a good edge. Like it forces you to work that little bit harder. And I think it's brilliant for team morale. There's a lot of reasons why it's good. So
yeah, I love doing it. I hope to get back there again one day. But, it'd be interesting to see the difference between this year compared to next year. I think next year will go. I think it'll go nuts again.
I hope so. Look, I'll have everything crossed that this year is a success, and then next year follows on, and then we can get back to some sort of normality. So my question to you, Joel, is: would you go there for marketing purposes again?
No. So like you, there's no way of knowing how it changes your business because you don't know what you'd be doing if you didn't go there, and how that would affect it. But yeah, again, the same deal. Like we've always got 6 to 9 months work booked in front of us anyway, so there's no point getting work from it. But exactly like you said, the work we did before being there a couple of years in a row compared to after it is chalk and cheese. Like it's, but working on those projects was something I was aiming to do. So it wasn't just the garden show that we did to build up that profile. It definitely makes a big difference. And I'm competitive, so I love doing it anyway, just for the chance of winning something within your work, basically.
Yeah, correct. And it's a bit like, I describe it like golf. When you play golf, you're competing against yourself. You're not, the beauty of flower shows is you can win a gold. Yes, there's a best in show. And yes, it would be brilliant to win one. So I'm not going to dispute that. But your first intention is to win a gold medal. But that's your goal. And more than one person, you can have 3 gold medals, you can have 6 gold medals. That's your first goal. So I like the fact that first and foremost, you're competing against yourself. And the camaraderie at the flower shows, despite the fact that you're competing, is brilliant.
Yeah.
Even when we did Chelsea, the competitors that you're up against, there's £1 million at stake. Like, it was huge money, but we all got along and we all strive to help each other to get to this invisible standard. But the camaraderie at a flower show is second to none.
So how did Chelsea come about for you?
Again, purely luck. Right place, right time. So I was on the landscape board back at the time, and I got to meet Wes at a few of these industry events, and we got along. And it was funny because Scott and I actually one day put on a whiteboard, if we ever got asked to go to the Chelsea Flower Show, would we say yes? Because we knew it was going to cost us something. And we came to the conclusion that at that point of our business career, it would be a definite no. So about 6 months later, I got asked by Wes if we wanted to build Jamie Drury's garden. And I said, mate, I'd love to, but the answer is no. And I got to the office the next day. I said, Scott, you'll never guess what happened. We got asked to do the Chelsea Flower Show. He said, what did you say? I said, mate, we said no. Get him on the phone, ring him up, tell him you're an idiot. I said, Scott, we agreed the answer would be no. It still cost us 20 grand to go, just in lost earnings. Like, you got sort of paid this nominal fee, and we couldn't afford it. And Scott was spot on. Scott said, Ian, if we knock this back, we'll regret it for the rest of our life. This goes beyond work. This goes beyond money. So I was fairly stubborn. I refused to ring Wes back, but luckily a week later he rang me and said, are you sure you want to say no? Now, I don't know if Scott rang him and said to re-ring, but he did ring us. We did say yes, and it did cost us, it cost the business a lot of money to be away from the business for so long. But I don't regret it for a millisecond. It was truly one of the best decisions we made. Exciting beyond belief, nerve-wracking beyond belief. And the reward when we got the gold in 2008 was something I'll never forget. Anyway, I would do it again in a heartbeat.
What did you say to the Queen when you met her?
Well, the first time I met her, it's a long story, but the short version is all these minders come around and tell you what you're supposed to do. You got to bow at the waist. You can't offer a hand. You can't touch her. You can say ma'am or mum or jam or your majesty. I decided your majesty because it was easy. So there's all these rules. I decided I would put my hands behind my back. I would bow to the chest height, not below. And as I bowed, I automatically moved my hand around to offer her hand. And one of the rules is, under no circumstances can you offer a hand in case she doesn't want to take it. And so as it was halfway out, I looked at my hand and went, oh, shit. And said it out loud, put my hand quickly behind my back, and then the Queen sort of offered her hand. She said, Mr. Barker. And she was absolutely pissing herself laughing because I desperately, my mum was a monarchist. I sincerely wanted to do the right thing to the nth degree, and I mucked it up within 3 seconds, but she was lovely. And then my job was to ask her if she would like to visit the stand or see the stand. So we had to walk her from the corner to the middle of the garden, which was 10 metres. And I've never been part of a paparazzi scrum. And there's this invisible barrier, 10 metres, and the paparazzi just stay this invisible 10 meters while you walk. It was just surreal. She was brilliant. She was really good. And then I got to meet her again in 2011, and she was equally wonderful and, really witty, smart. So it's an interesting thing going to Chelsea, because for 10 minutes, you're the celebrity and all the celebrities want to get on your stand. So it's quite a surreal thing. But again, the camaraderie. 2011, I've got a photo of Prince Albert whispering into my ear, "You've had 7, you bastard," while I was meeting the Queen. And so the challenge in Chelsea is to see how many royals you can get on your stand. So not going past your stand, but on. But in 2011, Monaco had a stand. So he was actually there as an entrant, but because he was also a royal, he had to follow the royal entourage. So he was keeping count of who had had what. And at 7, we were winning at that stage. So there's a photo of me laughing my head off, Prince Albert whispering in my ear after I've just bowed to meet the Queen. So, I left school at 15 to become a gardener. If you'd said to me that, 20 years later, you'll meet the Queen and get that photo, you'd lie. But just pure luck, just absolute. I can't thank Flemings enough. And I keep saying the word lucky. I think you've got to make your own luck by saying yes. And so if an opportunity comes, just say yes and then deal with the consequences later. But you still got to get lucky. You still got to, when the opportunities won't come unless you get a little bit lucky, and then you've got to make your own luck by saying yes. Yeah. And I'm so glad that Scotty talked us into saying yes.
And also you got to work your ass off when you get the opportunities as well.
Oh, look, I was at Chelsea 2008. I remember on day 3 of the build, just getting back to the hotel room and going, how was I stupid enough to get myself here? Like, you are so far out of your depth, it's not funny. And going, I literally remember thinking, I can't do this. There's no way I can compete at this level, and what am I going to do? And then the realization, well, you don't really there's nowhere to hide. So once you say yes, there's literally nowhere to hide. You either got to just get up and go. So my notebook, they started calling Blanky. So my theory was I would just write lists. So I just wrote list after list after list. And by the end of the show, they burnt my notebook and Blanky left me. But so I'm a great believer in lists and planning, but it's the only thing that got me through was the note taking. And the reality of when we got the gold, the whole team went up, but I was still staring at the sign because I didn't quite believe it was gold. So it was on Better Homes and Gardens, where the team has gone up for what feels like 30, 60 seconds. And I'm still staring at this little tag going, does it really say gold? Maybe it says silver gilt. Maybe it says, I just couldn't comprehend that it said the word gold. So because it was so difficult is why it was so rewarding. And then the learning curve, because I put myself under that much pressure. The next time I was under pressure, it did nothing compared to Chelsea after that. Like, Chelsea was so difficult. Everything else was easier. So I'm glad I said yes.
How is it compared to, so had you been to Melbourne before that, other than when you were working with the other guy?
Yeah. So I worked for the other guy in 96, and then the very next year, my first year in business, I did a garden which was called Bali Dreaming. So it was a Balinese garden with an Australian tinge. It was the most revolting garden you could ever see. It was highly commended, which basically means it won no medals. And now that I look back at it, I can cringe, but at the time I was proud of it. And doing a show garden at Melbourne in my first year of business was probably stupid, but it gave me some credibility. People thought, oh, well, if he's good enough to do that, he can do that. So yeah, every 4 or 5 years we would go in and do some sort of a display, mainly because it's fun. And again, it challenges you a little bit. But Melbourne compared to Chelsea, it doesn't compare.
So what's it like? Because in Melbourne, you're not allowed to penetrate the ground with anything at all, pretty much.
Yeah.
Chelsea, you can do everything.
Yeah. So there's in Show Alley, there's the main strip. There's 150-year-old poplars behind the main strip. One Chinese garden in 2008 dug 5 meters down beside these trees, like 5 meters. And the theory of that garden was that they were digging to build a show garden, and they discovered an ancient Chinese ruin. Like, it was an amazing theory, beautiful garden, but they're digging 5 meters down next to these poplars and no one's saying a word because they know the poplars are going to survive. Like, if we put a peg in at the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show, the world's going to end. Look, I understand there's a limit to what we should be allowed to do, but I think the city, I think they go way too far. The fact that you can't level an area and then reinstate it, it would take 3 months for it to be reinstated. You can do X-rays of the ground, so you can penetrate, you can work out where the roots are. There's so many things they could do to make it more accessible and therefore a better show and therefore a better event that they don't do because they're too scared. I'm a huge critic of it because at Chelsea they do it and people, like, you've got no idea. The opening day of the flower show, there's people out the front who are, scalping the tickets for £200. Can you imagine people out the front of the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show trying to scalp tickets? It just wouldn't.
Yeah.
It wouldn't happen. The tickets for the Chelsea Flower Show are sold out 6 months in advance. Yes. It's a different world because they've made it a different world. So the city of Melbourne, I'm not saying the event organisers now, the city of Melbourne could benefit so much more from being just a little bit riskier, which is why I love Jeff Kennett so much. Jeff Kennett was the one who got it off the ground and, forced us to be allowed to use the Carlton Gardens because no one wanted the Carlton Gardens to be used. He said, well, hang on, the Carlton Gardens were built for shows. That's what it was built for. So he just forced his way through, and that's how it got off the ground.
Yeah, right.
It probably needs to be that sort of, there's probably some Jeff Kennett haters that are going to listen and say why. But anyway, I'm a massive fan because he got it through, and it is what it is. But with a bit of foresight, I think it could be a lot more.
And speaking of X-raying the ground, one of your projects I saw on your website and I've seen on your Instagram a fair bit, which I've absolutely love, was one you did in Deep Dean with some herringbone bluestone paving as a path.
Yeah.
And then I only just read it today that you had, because I was looking at all the established trees that you got there, you're working around doing these paving paths on and wondering whether you hired or excavated or something. When I saw that you had to X-ray the ground for it because they were heritage trees, were they?
Well, so there's one cork tree that's about 165 years old or something. We didn't have to, but the client is brilliant. So first and foremost, congratulations to the clients, because if it wasn't for the clients, the garden wouldn't have got done. They brought the property for the garden, not the other way around. So they renovated the house, but they were more interested in the garden. So the garden is reported to have been done by Guilfoyle originally. And so the pin oaks in the front and the cork tree in the back were definitely part of that original garden. And it wasn't an option for the trees to die. In fact, we wanted to bring them back because the cork tree, if you look on Insta, half the tree looks like it's dying. It's actually the other way around. There was so much bamboo and crap leaning against the cork tree, it killed the back half of the tree. So we removed everything that was within a 12-metre radius of the tree. We then had the ground injected with growth hormones. We had the ground x-rayed, so we knew that wherever we would dig, the building wasn't going to touch it, the garage wasn't going to touch it. And for the pathway through the front, we did that just as a precaution. We were quite confident that there wouldn't be any tap roots through the path, but we just wanted to make sure. And again, we didn't have to do it, like the council weren't saying we had to do it, but so the only heritage tree was the cork tree.
Right.
But the pin oaks should be, like that cluster of pin oaks should be, because they're extraordinary.
It looks amazing.
So, yeah, well, the garden warranted a formal front path. From the gate to the front door should have been a straight, formal path. We were convinced that's what it should have been, but how do you get through all these pin oaks? So we decided that we would draw a formal path and then just stretch it in. So that's where the herringbone, that's where it came from. So what was the most formal path we could do? It would be a bluestone border with a herringstone, and then we just pushed it either side wherever the trees were. And every time we put it on Instagram, it goes nuts. So clearly it worked.
The staff enjoy cutting all those?
No, I'm under very strict instructions to never do it again. Interesting, we did a Daniel Robinson driveway with a similar sort of pattern scheme with these curves going everywhere through a rectangular path. That was 22 years ago. And Scott, who was my apprentice back then, he turned around and said, hey, if you ever draw anything remotely like that again, I quit. And we had a couple on this one saying, if you ever draw anything like this again, we're done. Because there was thousands and thousands of cuts. You talked about Dave Baskin. That was his last job.
All right. Yeah.
So he finished that one up for us. He was there for a year. He finished it off, and then he went out for himself.
Yeah. Designing straight
so
paths.
It was a special job. On that deep Dean job, there's a contemporary bench seat out the back that's also got the herringbone. So this bench seat's got so it's got the herringbone on the 45.
Yeah.
So when it hits the top, you've got this mitre on the 45 heading back, and Chris Ruck, who's been with us for about 6 or 7 years, that became his baby. I think we quoted for 5 days to do the herringbone. It took him 13. We don't care. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, it's really good. But again, that's something we're never allowed to do again.
Yeah. But you should share the hell out of that because it looks amazing. So it's good for people to see it, not just the clients who live there.
Yeah, there is a design mistake to it. Do you want to try and pick it?
I wouldn't have a clue.
So we did the herringbone, but I wanted to do 300 by 100, so they would be slightly longer, like they're long and thin.
Yep.
And when we put the four down for one length, but I didn't take into consideration the cork on them.
Yeah.
Like I've been doing this for so long. Like how could I not take into consideration the grout lines? So the herringbone doesn't work. So the herringbone drifts out by 5 mil every 2 meters. You can't pick it. Dave did an amazing job. We can pick it, and next time you look at the image, I reckon you'll pick it.
Yes.
But it does drift out because it's on a curve. No one can see.
Yeah. And you got a plant in between the lines of it.
Correct. So it should have been 310 by 70 mil.
Yeah. Yeah.
300 by 70 mil.
Other than that one, if that was going to be your answer, have you got a favourite project that you've worked on?
I can never say I've got a favourite project, mainly because it's not fair on the clients. But the Deep Dean one for me would be one of, I think it would have to be the favourite job. So, the garden's originally 150, 60 years old. The clients built it for the garden, not the other way around. So that was special. It was, we get a lot of freedom in what we do, and we get a huge amount of trust from the client. But this one was unequivocal trust. So not one component of the garden was changed by the clients. So from the concept drawing to completion, it was 100% trust. Bethany designed the rear garden. I designed the front garden. Matt from Antiques came on as a consultant with it. We've got an extraordinary plant person called Gillian who helps us with our plant choices. We then brought on Matt from Antique Perennials to help consult as well, because of, anyone who touched the job, all we wanted to do was do it justice. Steve, the construction manager, was heavily involved. It was our first $1 million plus job, so he nailed the quote. Dave was the supervisor, and it was his last gig. He was there for a year. He managed, those 2 crews of 3 plus 1. So you talk about a team garden. That's it. Like I can't think of another job that has brought in so many different people, and there was no egos. We just wanted to do it justice. And I think we have, and to the client's credit too, it'll be opened later in the year. And their intention is they want us to open it every 2 years. They want us to open it twice a year from now on.
Yeah.
I think it's too much. I think we'll probably open it once a year. We might do an autumn, then we'll do a spring or something along those lines. So I think the first one will probably be the Rotary Garden weekend. But the clients absolutely unequivocally want to open it to the public every year, because they believe a garden of that quality shouldn't be wasted on them. Yeah, I can't stress enough, the clients are extraordinary people. And it's an acre in the middle of the city. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah. Yeah. How did you get that job?
We did their previous garden. So I can't mention names, but they rang us in 2007 and said, "Can you do the garden? We're just finishing the build." I didn't know Roz at the time, and I had to say no because we were going to the Chelsea Flower Show. And I'd never said no, like it wasn't in my vocab. Someone else built it and mucked it up, and I won't say who they were, but they genuinely, like there was so many issues that they had to get a project manager in to manage the fixes. So she asked us if we would fix it, which no one wants to do.
No.
I felt so guilty. We went in and we fixed this little garden. It was a tiny, tiny garden and one that you would not normally take on. But we fixed it, and then she said, "Would you maintain it?" And we go, "It's too small, but she's really nice. Let's maintain it." So we maintained this little garden in Canterbury for 8 years. And then the other thing that I used to go from Bulleen, I grew up in Bulleen. I used to get the bus to Junior Marsden on Canterbury Road, and I would go past this house in Deep Dean. And I used to go past as a little kid going, "I wonder who lives in there." So when the phone call came through that the house had come up, they heard me scream when I saw the address come up on my email. And then when I found out that it was the same client from the little house down the road, it was fantastic. So that's how we got it. And she honestly said at the first meeting, she said, "Ian, this is why we brought it. The previous owners had let it go. And she said, our sole goal is to bring this garden back. We're in your hands." And they just left us alone. It was us pestering them. "What do you think of this? And what do you think of that?" "Oh yeah, it's okay." The only thing the husband wanted was a weeping willow, like the willows that you can't use beside the rivers.
Yeah.
And so it was the only thing he requested, and I had to say, "I'm sorry, Ma, I can't do it." So he got a peppercorn instead.
Yeah, similar. It's about as close as you can get.
Yeah. So if you look at that one, I would suggest that that's pure luck, because what are the odds of saying no first, the landscaper mucking it up, then agreeing to fix it, and then 10 years later going back and doing an acre in Deep Dean? So it's pure luck.
It's the luck again, but it's also saying yes to things. Like you did say no initially, but then it's a job you wouldn't normally take on, and you said, "Oh yeah," because you felt guilty, you did it. So
you're correct.
A bit of both.
Yeah, look, it is, and I'm I know it's fluff, but I'm a great believer of what goes around comes around. There's a few people in our industry that don't do the right thing, and they manage to hang on for 10, 12 years, and then eventually it comes around. And I could name the ones where it's come around, and I like the fact that karma train comes around and might take 10 years or even 15 years, but it always comes around. So what goes around comes around. It's a great way.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I believe that 1,000%. But one thing about your Instagram too, I've seen on there, and I wanted to thank you for, was I saw you've got your office dog and you've named it after me, called Barney. So just wanted to thank you for that. I assume it's not named after the purple dinosaur.
It was Barney Rubble for a while. And then it was Barney off The Simpsons. So our last dog was called Montgomery, after Monty Burns.
Yep.
And the one before that was a Labrador that was named Larrabee off Get Smart. So if anyone's old enough to know Get Smart, they'll remember Larrabee off Get Smart. It was actually going to be Barnaby, and then Barnaby Joyce mucked up. So we had to go with Barney Rubble. The obvious question is, why are you called Barney?
It's not because I'm large like the purple dinosaur, but because last name is Barnett. So my old man had the same. When I started the business, or when I was working for Install, there was already a Joel working there when I started. So I only went by Barney. And then when I went out and started my business by myself, people didn't know who Joel was when I'd ring up and ask for something, because they didn't know that wasn't my name.
Yeah.
But I just assumed that you'd named the dog after me because I eat like a Labrador as well, everything in sight. But
there's a few photos that are going around at the moment from me from the LV Golf Day, where it has been suggested I've put a fair bit of COVID weight on. And thanks to that photo, I'll try and lose. I think I have to now try and lose that COVID weight.
The camera puts on 10 kilos. So you're fine.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, mate.
And last question I've got for you is, what's coming up in the future for the company?
Well, I'm now on a mission to, I'm 52, and we've got 33 staff as it stands today, including some staff that have been with us for well over a decade and have actively sort of said we don't want to leave. We've got no interest in leaving. So the biggest plan on the table now is succession planning. So I want to get to the point where by the time I'm 55, I'm not required in the business. So if something happens to me, the business has a genuine succession plan where if something happens to me, some triggers will happen that mean other people in the business will inherit some of the business, and we'll have buyout clauses and all that sort of stuff. So they can choose whether they want to continue the business on or not, and that requires some pretty some fairly strict procedures where they don't ask me any questions from a business point of view. So within 3 years, I want to be out of the business, so I can then just choose to work in the business, which I know seems counterintuitive, but I love drawing. So I genuinely, I missed a meeting last Tuesday because I was drawing and I completely lost track of time. And then I looked up and went, oh shit, I've got to go. There's not many things that I do in my life where I lose track of 4 or 5 hours because I'm doing something, and love it. I didn't care that I missed the meeting. I probably should have, but so I don't ever want to stop drawing, but I don't want to have to draw. If there's a choice between going to play golf or going on a trip and drawing, that's what I'll do. So that's the number one project, and I reckon I started it last year. So I've got 4 years in which hopefully to achieve that one, and then if that happens, I'll be 55. I actually don't ever want to stop working. So I'd like to. I'm really, really enjoying what I'm doing with Dave. I would like to choose maybe a couple more where I get involved in the business. And, I made so many mistakes with the business in the early days that Dave's not making because I'm mentoring. So I would genuinely like to get involved in that a bit more. And I think I could do, Jeff Kennett again does 5 businesses. So he mentors 5 businesses, and he won't mentor a 6th unless one of the 5 drop off. So maybe I'll copy Jeff and do the 5. And as for jobs, we've got a ripper up in Canberra that's huge. We've got an IT guy, he's 35. He's got 15 acres and he just wants to garden the whole thing. He wants to create his own forest and motorbike tracks and basketball courts. And he's so much fun, it's ridiculous. And we've just recently signed a big one down in Leopold that is 10 acres, and the owners he seems to be a really wonderful man, and he's calling it his folly. So it's a bit like us doing flower shows. He knows that it'll never make him any money. In fact, it'll probably just drain him full of money. But how often do you get to do 10 acres? And I don't know about you, but I've never done 10 acres. So yeah, that one's really exciting. So that'll be a 5-year plan. So there's always a job that comes along, and it's like you think, okay, I'm full, I've got enough, I'm not going to say yes to anything, and then you get a phone call and you go, oh wow, I've got to go that one. So as good as you get at saying no, every now and then something comes up where you say, oh, I'm so big.
Yeah, I've loved this chat with you because a lot of it, it's crazy to think how much fun you've had and enjoy doing what you do, and it's your job. Like that's what you do for work.
Yeah.
There's so many people who hate their job. It's crazy. So it's great that you actually love what you do.
I do. I play tennis with a group of dads from the Canterbury Primary School, and they're all business professionals. They have mortgages that are probably bigger than they ever hoped that they would get, and we often talk about the work-life balance, the 70% of people that probably do a job that they don't really want to do, but they're now locked into doing it because they've got a mortgage. I can honestly say to people, I still genuinely love it. Like I didn't ever get into it to make any money. I've made enough money now where I feel like I'm comfortable. I don't, how lucky am I that I don't need anything. I don't, there's things I would like, but there's genuinely nothing I need. So it has made, I'll never be super rich like some of my clients, but I don't need to be, and I don't necessarily want to be. It doesn't bring them any more happiness. So, I consider myself just stupidly lucky that I'm in a position where I've got a nice house, I've got a lovely dog, a beautiful wife, and I genuinely enjoy my job, and a job that I actually don't want to stop. So many people at my age are starting to think about winding down and retiring. Like, I want to get the business where if something happens to me, the people that make my world go around are safe and secure and they can continue on. But I don't really want anything to happen to me, and I don't really want to go anywhere. So, I think I'm very lucky.
Oh, and can't thank you enough for coming on. Really appreciate your time.
Joel, always a pleasure. Congratulations to yourself too.